Hello, friends. It is week 2, day 2, and it is obviously our lecture. We just had a riveting office hour on Bootstrap. So if you guys are, I'm going to use some Bootstrap today. So if you guys were not there, it was recorded. It'll be put in our class sheet as always. So you can find that here. Of course, I got to sign in. Give me a second. Oh, there we go. It'll be our class sheet. It'll be put right here for you. So that way, right after class today. So if you guys are wanting to understand a little bit more, we just talked about how Bootstrap really is set up, some of the power of it, and some of the things that I use. I'll be using it throughout the class, kind of moving forward. I'll be using this. And so you guys are also able to see my screen, the actual right screen this time, right? Like my actual code. Perfect. Thanks for that.
Well, no. Yeah. You're good.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, we had a thing in office hour where I was sharing the wrong screen, and here we are. Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping. As always, you have 2 discussion questions due by 11:59. I fat fingered it. It's supposed to be 59. Sorry about that. So you guys didn't lose 9 minutes. 11:59 PST on Sunday. You've got 3 core assignments. Prop it up, hook forms, and more forms. So please make sure that you guys are doing that. One thing I did want to bring up, and something I forgot to mention, is there's a developer tool that is a React component dev tool that I would really encourage you guys to get. I believe it's just an extension. React dev tool, Chrome. Let me see. Yeah. So this is going to be huge and really important. If you saw that I just literally Googled it. I'll put this in the chat right here. Oh, my camera's not on. Thank you. I'll put this in the chat right here. So this is a React developer tool. We're going to see today, it's going to give us access to seeing certain things within our React project. So if definitely use this. It's going to be a huge kind of bug fixer, problem solver sort of thing that we'll start using today when we're dealing with state and we're dealing with forms and wanting to understand how our code is working. So I know that they have it for other, like if you use Safari or if you use, I think like Firefox, they also have that. But I believe this one is only Chrome because it's on the Chrome Web Store. But if you just, Firefox or Safari React developer tools. Now, if it's like DuckDuckGo, I'm not sure if they have those. Or Brave, I know is another one that are awesome, but I'm not sure if they have them. I would just, search React Inspector developer tools. And I'm sure that I believe that each one has kind of their own thing because it's a really popular tool for everybody. As you can see, there's over 4 million users of this tool. Yeah, so it works on Brave. Thanks, Nandor. I thought they got off Chromium. I thought they had their own engine. Interesting. Cool. So yeah, make sure you guys are downloading this because I'm going to start using it today. So that way we can kind of look at our code, but make sure you guys download this, especially if you use Chrome. Obviously, you can use whatever you want. I used to use Brave, but it doesn't work on my laptop. But just sometimes understanding that, Chrome might be a little bit better for, some of these dev tools. Thanks, Philip, for doing that. If you guys don't mind, actually just putting this in the Discord, Philip, if you don't mind, or if somebody wants to put the Chrome one in Discord as well, that'd be really helpful just to that way people have this and have access if they didn't come to this lecture. It'd be great. If not, Paul, can you do that? That'd be helpful. Cool. So make sure you guys download that. We'll use that. And again, we went through Bootstrap within our office hour, just from a very, very, very high level, kind of the basics of Bootstrap, why it's popular, why it's important, and why I specifically use it. Cool. So any questions on this? Great. Yesterday we did a recap, or just as a recap of what we did yesterday, we looked at state, right? And we looked at this hook called useState, which really just allows us to bind some information to a component, right? To have access to some information within a component. It's what we call a React hook. And so we talked all about hooks. And really it's just some functions and some functionality that is built in to React. Yes, you can build custom hooks. We're not going to in this class. You can, but really there's just a few hooks that we're going to use within this class of use state and use effect. There are some other ones. If you do have some questions on them, happy to talk about that. And you can look at the entire documentation here. But we talked about use state, right? And we saw that we could manipulate state and we could keep track of some information. And so even if we don't have props, right, we can, if we have some sort of form or we have something, we can keep track of information and have increased functionality within our code base, which is really important. We're going to continue to expand on state today and tomorrow. Really today and then tomorrow's just kind of, I would say if by tomorrow you're still really unfamiliar with it, that's going to be the time to continue to, I mean, obviously always ask questions, but by tomorrow it's not that you should be a wizard by any stretch of the imagination. But if it's still just like I'm writing in a whole, you're not understanding a piece, then maybe office hour tomorrow is a great time for us to talk through that. So I think also just with state, the more practice you have, the more it's going to make sense. Cool. So that's what we did with use state. Now, what we're gonna, and thanks, Paul. TAs are here, Dojo Hall is here. People want to help as well. Gray's back tomorrow, and then is not going out of town, I don't think, for the rest of the stack. So, so we are here to help and walk through some stuff with you. Something I wish I would have talked about yesterday because I think it maybe caused a little bit more confusion, but we're going to talk about today are events and synthetic events within React. Does anybody remember what an event is back in like web fundamentals? Can anybody give me an example of an event maybe?
Like an on-click?
Like an on-click is a great one. There's an on-click you can think of like on hover, right? There's on change. There's so many different sort of events, right? And that is within JavaScript itself. Now React calls them synthetic events, but you can sort of think about them the same way. There's a couple different nuances there. Really the main one is that there's going to be two kind of, is that instead of doing on click as all lowercase, we use camel case here, similar to how we do class name versus class. This is just on click, but it's got a capital C. So anytime we're wanting to do these events or event listeners, we're going to do this in camel case as well. But then also we still will need to manually call prevent default or event prevent default, depending on however you call it. Especially like when it comes to submitting forms, which we'll do tomorrow. We'll still need to do that as well. Now, I'm not really going to get into it. We're going to get into async, like asynchronous functions, like async await a little bit later on. So, not really necessary now, but events cannot be called asynchronously because of how React pulls synthetic events together. And so just so you guys know, when we're dealing with state and when we're dealing with synthetic events, React does a few different weird things with state. Maybe I'll look at here in a second where they actually pool or batch state together and then change it versus doing it sort of line by line, right? So instead of doing everything, I'm going to do this first line and then I'm going to wait and we're going to, once this is done, then I do the next line. Is it batches everything together and updates state there. So we'll see kind of how that is an issue here in just a second. Cool. But this is really from the perspective of what we're handling and what we're doing. Synthetic events operate very, very similar to our event listeners that we're familiar with. Now, one thing to note is when we use an on click, we have to use an anonymous function because what will happen is if we just have this alert, right, where we have this code right here, and let's pretend we don't have this anonymous function, this arrow function here. What will happen is before I even, and let's actually just go build this out. Let's just actually take that code. I'm going to call this event.jsx. Cool. And then I'm going to say REFCE. Perfect. Now let's pretend, let's just take this code real fast. We've got this button. On click. And what this is going to do is this is just going to alert that, hey, the button's been clicked. Cool, we're good to go. And then I think I need this. Okay. And then let's go into my code. Let's go to my app. And instead of doing this, we'll call it event. Did not do it. So we import event from components dot event or dot slash component slash event. So now if I am running my code, I'm going to do this and I'll show you what we're going to do today. Okay. Okay. So right now, if I click this, I get this alert that says the button has been clicked. Great. That's because my code has this. If I go to my event, I have this anonymous function, right? If I don't, let's say I just do this and I save it. Immediately, we can see that as this refreshes, I'm not even clicking my button and this is already running, right? And the reason is because as this is mounted and as this is running this code, it's going to get to this function. And remember that a parenthesis is a function, it evokes a function, invokes it, right? And so what this is doing is this is invoking our alert function immediately, regardless if we click on it or not. And so if I come here and I just press OK, I refresh it, it's going to automatically do that. That's where that anonymous function is going to come in handy, or that arrow function, and it's going to prevent that from happening. So if that's what's happening to you, if you're like, why is this already doing it? Why is it saving a whole bunch of stuff? It's because if we just do it as a normal function, this is going to be ran and then it's going to run this function immediately. But if we put it as an anonymous, then we can just do something like this. Click me, and then that goes there. Now I could create a new function if I wanted to. So this is one option to do our events. We're not going to use, I see in the chat, we're not going to use prevent default yet because we're not dealing with some data, and we'll get to prevent default tomorrow when we want to save some data. But for right now, all we're doing is we're wanting to make sure that when a button is clicked, this alert is happening. Now I could do this, what we call inline, just like this. And we'll see when we get to our form what that means as well. I can do this, or I could actually break this out and say something like const handle click, right? And that is just going to alert that I've got this. It's just going to do the same thing, right? Now, if I want to do it this way, all I have to do is then take my function name, because it's a arrow function, and just put handle click. So if I save this, instead of it being inline, now it operates the exact same way I click it. It does the same thing we need. It's just running this function when the button is clicked. Okay. How are we feeling? I feel like I kind of cruised through that. How are we feeling on this? Can you just put a 1 in the chat if this is making so much sense? Something below a 1 if you're like, I have no idea what's going on. Okay. So some 0.5s minus 24. Okay. Tabitha, we're going to go through it one more time real quickly. If I've got another button, so I'm going to say button, and this is going to have an on click. Now, this is all we're doing with this on click is that we were saying, hey, when this button is clicked, what do we want it to do? Right? Well, if I want it to alert and say something like alert the second button has been clicked. If I do it just like this, where I've got my event that's going to happen. In this case, and just in this case, it's an on-click. It could be on submit, on change, on hover, right? There's a ton of different events that can happen. In this case, we're just saying, hey, when this is a really popular one, when this is clicked, this is what we want it to do. If I leave it like this, what will automatically happen if I save this? We see that it automatically is clicked. I can't spell at all, just so you guys know. This is your next 6 weeks, by the way. I'm a terrible speller. You can see that this is automatically clicked and ran, right? Even though there's another button. That's my little button. I'm going to say second button. You think for somebody who types for a living, I'd be really good at typing. I'm not. Okay. So it says the second button has automatically been clicked, right? But we don't want it to be, we don't want to show that alert until this actual button is clicked. And that's because when React reads this, it's going to see, okay, on click, and it is preparing this. But when it's preparing it, it sees this alert. And remember, anytime we're calling a function or invoking a function, if we say the function name and then parentheses, oops, like if I say alert, right, that's me calling the alert function. And so while it's setting up our code and mounting our component, it sees this and it reads this alert and it invokes this function and passes in the information needed for alert, and it runs it automatically. The two ways we can handle that are by one, creating an anonymous function that allows us, and just by doing this, it prevents this from automatically running, saying only when it's clicked do I want to run this. That's exactly what this code is doing. The second way we can do it is to actually separate our function, especially if we had like a longer function, right? You might want to take it out, have here, it's still an anonymous function. It's still an arrow function, which is still, again, preventing us. If we just had this as a normal function, if we just said function handle click, it's going to do the same exact thing. But because this is an anonymous, then we say, cool, we want it to click. So now if I check this, I refresh, I click this button has been clicked. I click this, the second button has been clicked. So it's just us handling this synthetic event, or just using our event listener and saying, cool, when this is clicked, this is exactly what I want it to do. Does that make more sense to those that were 0.5, to those that were negative 24.5? Okay, gotten better. And with practice, we'll see this and as this goes. Okay, any questions on this? Okay. Well, I want to give you a little sneak peek of what we're going to be doing here today. So today we're going to be talking about forms. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a form and we're going to use state and update our state as it's typed, right? As we are typing and changing, we're going to update it and then we'll actually visualize it. So we're going to create some fun movie thing. So I'm going to create a movie called Shrek, and you can see as I type Shrek here, it automatically is showing up. If I type the year, I don't know, I just make this up. And I type this. We are taking this information of Shrek 2001 comedy, and then we're going to make it show up here. Right? We're not doing anything on our submit yet. We're going to probably do that tomorrow. I just want to make sure you guys understand state and handling data from forms, because there's going to be a little bit of stuff that we can do. But this is what we're going to be doing today. I know that you guys have sort of asked and said that it would be helpful to visualize what we're doing before we get there. That's exactly what this is, right? Here's our solution. Here's a working project, and this is exactly what we're going to build. Cool. So let's go in with that being said, and let's go build it. So I'm going to go back. Cool. So we have our project. And we just have this event, but this is not super necessary. So I'm actually just going to delete this. I'll keep the code there. That way, if you guys want it, you guys can have it. But we don't have, we're starting with a blank sheet. Blank sheet for what we're doing. So I am going to create a form. And as we're dealing with forms, there's going to be a couple different things that we can do, a couple ways that we're going to handle this stuff. Really, we're going to take this and I'm going to show you this way, and I'll show you a different way to do it. And again, today, we're not really worrying about submitting when we submit, like when we're quote unquote creating a user, we'll do it this way and we'll use ePrevent default. We're gonna do that tomorrow and do some sort of validations and using map to iterate through that stuff. But for right now, we're just going to take this information. And what we want to do is we want to take this information from our form and we're going to update our state to handle that accordingly. And if we have time, we'll go over actually like creating a user if we wanted. But for right now, we are a-okay. Okay. If I'm going to do this, what would be my first step? We have our app, right? We have this sort of project kind of already built out. I've already run npx create react app, right? What is my first step of what I need to do? I've already got my components folder. What do you guys think I should do? Think I should just build out my form in here? Or where should I?
No,
No, right? What should I do?
a form component probably.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's say form.jsx. Great. And then I am going to say RAFCE. Perfect. That's a React arrow function that exports because you have to have this export. Great. And so this is going to be my form. Cool. Now, just as a reminder, and we talked about this in office hour, I am using Bootstrap for this. I come into my index.html within my public folder. And then here is where I'm going to have my, this is my Bootstrap. There we go. This is my Bootstrap CDN. You can just get this off of, like if you just literally type in Bootstrap, then come here and just copy this first guy. Because I'm just dealing with CSS, I'm not dealing with JavaScript. I just copy this. I go into my index.html. I add in the link here, and then we're good to go. Now I can use the power of Bootstrap. And again, if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, I'll try to explain it as I go, but I did a more in-depth thing in office hours. So please make sure to do that if you're interested. And if not, don't even worry about it. But just know if you're trying to use the same classes that I am, and you don't have Bootstrap, it's not going to look the same because you don't have that code already built. Cool. So we have this form, right? And what I'm going to do is I like to see, I saw that it had two things, right? We first had our form here. That's a bad color. And then we also had our information here. So I'm going to have these side by side. What do you think I need to have these in? Like what's going to allow them to go side by side? If they're both divs, what can I do?
You mean like put them in a row?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm going to need to put these in a row. So I'm going to come here. And first and foremost, I'm just going to say, and this is a kind of a cheat for if you're just wanting to add in a class, I'm just going to say row. And that creates a div with a class of row. Now you can do that with any element. Like if I wanted to, like right now, I'll create a form, and you can do that with any element. You have to put the element's name first, but div is sort of default. So if you just do .row, it's going to assume that you mean a div. So let's actually create our form. I think it'd be fun. And I like to just create like a movie database sort of thing, kind of like an IMDb, but not near as like crazy, right? To where all we're going to want to keep track of is our movie title, the year it was released, and then a genre. So that's it. So let's create our form to match that information. So again, I'm using Bootstrap, but I'm going to say form dot. I'm going to use column medium 4 which is just saying I want 4 out of my 12 columns. So if you guys weren't in the office hour, Bootstrap works on a grid. And so it just has 12 even columns across your entire, doesn't matter what size of the screen, but it's got 12 even columns based on the size of your screen, right? So it slices it up in 12 places on however you're viewing it. So I'm saying I want to take up a third of this. Cool. By saying form dot column medium 4, I'm saying, hey, I need a form element and it's got a class of column medium 4. But we saw in office hour, if I just do this, it's going to be all the way to the left of my screen, right? It's going to be like kind of touching the edge of my screen. And I didn't like that. So I am going to say something like offset 1. So I'm saying offset 1 column. So that way it doesn't look too dumb. I press enter. Cool. It does column medium 4, offset 1, and I've got my little form here. Great. Now, within each label and input, I like to put them in their own div group. And in this case with Bootstrap, it's called a form group. So I'm assuming it's going to ask me to do that. Yep. So I'm creating a div and it's going to have a form group, right? And within that, I'm going to have my label. Now notice that our label, similar to how we've got class name and on click with a capital C, for label, if you're dealing with a 4, it's HTML4, not just 4, right? So that's another weird thing. Now, obviously, if you don't have this, that's okay. But we want this to be title. Right? And we're going to say title. Perfect. Now let's come here and we're going to have an input type text.
I'm sorry, Will. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. On the line above the label HTML4, what was that again? You have to have HTML there for what?
Yeah. So, well, if you remember back from like web development, if you had a label, you just put 4, and that's what allowed you to associate the two, right? Like this input and this guy.
Yeah.
We can't do 4 in the same way that we don't just do class, we do class name. So in React or JSX, we do HTML4.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine.
So label, you had like a whole thing populate on that. And I'm having a hard time having that pop up because I don't have,
Copilot.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
So
you, you don't have to copy and paste it. I'm downloading Copilot right now, but like I don't understand the syntax prior to pressing enter.
I'm sorry, I'm not. No, you don't copy and paste it. It just automatically does it for you. And
So I
like,
just press label and then enter and it'll automatically.
well, so it'll do something like this and then see how it is grayed out. If I want that, I just press, see if I accept word, I just press tab, or I can accept just a word. So I can just press tab and it automatically will do it for me. Yeah, that's just Copilot. Okay. So let's kind of break this down too. Here we've got an input and things we know are the type, right? Because this is a string, it's just a title. This is going to be type text. We've got a name, and this is going to be really important coming up. So we want to make sure that our inputs have a name, or we could use ID, but I usually use name. ID is here. This is from Copilot. It's not like if you didn't have the ID and if you didn't have the HTML4, it's still going to work the same way. Like it's going to be a-okay. You just want to make sure that you've got your name and your type here. And then I'm adding this class of what we call form control. This is from Bootstrap to make my input look nice. Cool. And then I close my div because I finished my first one, right? I've got title here. We said we wanted a genre or release year. So I'm going to say label. And then this is going to be for release year. I'll just put year because it's way too much typing. Release year. Release yeet. It's funny. Perfect. And then I'm having an input for the same thing, but I'm going to have this as a type number because it's a year, right? So I want to be able to type in the number versus having it be a sort of string and having to cast that. Same sort of thing. I want to have this year right here, and we'll see why in a second. Then I've got form control. I'm gonna have a div there. One more for not a poster. I'm gonna say label. And this is gonna be for genre. Perfect. And then I've got an input type. This one is text because it's obviously a string. We got a name of genre, and then we have form control there. And then now we're just going to do a button dot btn says okay, in Bootstrap, I want to use a button dot btn primary, which is just the different color of button. Again, we go through all of this in office hour. If you're kind of like, what the heck are all these classes? You don't have to have all the classes as well. Like if you got rid of the class names for all of this, it's still going to work the exact same way if you just have a normal form. And then I know that I want this, oops, dot mt3. In this shortcut, if I'm wanting to add multiple classes like I am right now, I just put a dot for each new class. And I press enter, and you see that it gave me 3 distinct classes. And then I'm going to say create movie. Cool. So here's my form. We don't see it because I need to go into my app.js and type in my form. It imports for me. I close it out. Should be good to go. And now I can see my title, my release year, my genre, and my movie. We see that because this is a number, we have this cool functionality. And as I hover over one, you see how it like outlines blue. That's all from Bootstrap. Again, if you didn't do it this way, if you just have a normal form, A-okay. It's not going to change anything we're doing. Cool. This create movie button doesn't do anything yet, but we have it, and we'll build on that tomorrow. Cool. So if I want to keep track of this information, right? I want to see my information or see what my user is adding in. What is something I can use to keep track of some information within a component? Anybody know? Yeah, exactly. State, right? We're going to use our use state. We're going to keep track of that. Now, I said yesterday that there's 2 different ways that we can handle our state. And I'm going to do one way, and the way that it shows on the platform. And then we'll sort of refactor our code and show you why I think another way is a little bit easier. But then that way you can change and say, okay, this is what I want to, I think that this will be, I'll choose whichever one you want. So if I want these each in state, I'm going to create a piece of state for each one. So I'm going to say const title, set title. Now, as a reminder, this is called what? I have 2 different names here. Title is
Getter.
my getter, and then my setter is my
Setter.
setter. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm starting this as nothing. If I started this as unicorn, then by default, this would start as unicorn, right? I am using use state, but what do I need in order for me to actually use it? What do I need to do? I can see that I'm getting an error here. It says use state is not defined. What do I need to do? I need to import it. Yep, exactly. So I import up here, comma, use state. Perfect. Now I'm good to go. And one thing to note is I have a piece of state here right now, right? I've got this title, my set title, right? And I'm automatically setting it at unicorn. Now, where the power of that developer tool comes in is now when I inspect, I can see the normal things, right? My console, my sources, my application, whatever. But now I've got these 2 new pieces called components and profiler. And components is really where we're going to live. Now, because I have this React developer tool, I'm in my form component, and you can see that I've got a piece of state called unicorn. So it's a way that we can say what like if my state's not, or if it's not working, how I think, I can look and say, well, what is my state currently showing, right? What is it doing? And it's a way that we can problem solve by using these tools. This is something we will go to over and over and again. If I was bringing in props, if I was bringing in props, this would tell me what props I have access to. So as I'm debugging, this is going to be a really, really, really good thing to sort of help debug with. But right here, I can see I'm already starting with this state of unicorn, right? Great. Now we need to do our year. So I'm going to say const year, and maybe we'll do like, I don't know, 1920. And then we're going to do genre, set genre, and we'll just keep that as empty. Perfect. Now, if I come back and I refresh, I have my form. And here you can see I've got state 1, state 2, state 3, right? I have access now to some state. I call it, this is my title, this is my year, this is my genre, but I see I have 3 pieces of state that I now am available to do. Cool. Now, what I want to do though, is I want this to update when my user types in a new title, right? So if I'm typing here and I'm saying, I want Shrek instead of unicorn, I want this state to update and see Shrek, right? I want to keep track of what my user is doing. Well, there's a couple ways that we can do this. The first one is I can use an event, a synthetic event to keep track of when my input is changing. Does anybody know? Yep, Ahmed already said it in the chat. We can use an on change. So if I say on change, what I will have is I've got an event that I'm going to call E, right? And what I can do, and we'll make sure we decompress all of this and kind of walk through, because this might be, you know, at the beginning, you're like, oh, what the heck is going on? I'm saying, hey, when this event happens, when this has changed, when the value of my input has changed, what I want it to do, and this is for title, I want it to set title. And what do I want to set it to? Anybody know? I want to set it to, and we'll look at this here in just a second. There's going to be this thing called an e.target.value. Cool. We'll look at this. What the heck is an E and what the heck is an e.target.value here in a second. But just to show, I could do it in line. I could do it that way, to where if I refresh this and I say, you see that now my state is updated to Shrek, right? It is listening for a change within my input. And once it changes, it is saying, cool, I am setting that value of title to whatever the value is within my input. And we're going to look at this here in just a second. Cool. That way, if I'm here and I just take this away and I just type S, right? You see my state change to S, H, and it changes to SH, R, E, K, because each time as it changes, it is updating my state, right? I'm keeping track of what my user's doing. Now, what the heck is this e.target.value? The other way we could do it, I'm just going to get rid of this for right now, is, and this is why I just want to show you that I want to handle. So I'm going to say const handle title. This is taking in our event. And what I first want to do is I just want to console.log E. Let's look at this. Let's say, what the heck is going on here? So I have this handle title function that we just saw from our synthetic events. I can pass this in as long as this is an anonymous function, right? Doesn't have a name. I say handle title. What I can do is, as I change this, so I'm going to say, let's go to my console so that way we can see it live. I already changed it, but if I say SHREK, I have all of these events that are happening. Let's look at one. There's a whole bunch of things that are happening within this event, right? The one I care about though, is within this event that we have called E, right? E. And this is just saying that we don't have to put like a parentheses E. React does that for us, right? React does that for us. But we know React knows, hey, on this change, I'm taking in some event, right? An event is happening. And I'm going to call that event E. I could call this unicorn if I wanted. This is just like if we had a function and we call, that did summation, but instead of calling it A and B, we called it unicorn and cupcake. And then we returned, unicorn plus cupcake, right? All it's doing, it's taking in whatever value that the function receives. And it says, I've got this value and I'm going to call it unicorn, right? Normally in development, especially with React, you're going to see E, or you might see event. And I'll just do event. So I'm super descriptive. But this is saying, cool, I am getting some sort of event, and this is an object, right? We can see it from here. This is a synthetic based event. And within this, it's got a whole bunch of keys, and there's one called target. So if we look at this, we can even see as I hover over this, it looks at the exact input that is associated to this event, right? This is what was changed, this input right here. So if I look at target, I have access to a lot of other stuff. The main one I'm going to look at is value. In this case, it was Shrek. Now, obviously, if I go up one before I have the K and I go to target and I go to value, it just says, oh, no, it says Shrek. Did I change it? Target. As I go up, these should be different. I wonder if it's changing because the target has that and updates it. Yeah, I wonder if it's bringing from that. Okay, regardless, what we're doing is we're saying, cool, within my event, I'm going to go into my target and I want to get the value that my user is giving me. In this case, is Shrek, right? And we're saying within my code, hey, the other way I could do it, if I didn't want to do it in line, is I could say set title event.target.value. That's the same thing as if I said set title, in this case, Shrek, right? Because Shrek is, if I were to go into my event object and look at the target key, within that key, I look at my value key, the answer to that is going to be Shrek, right? And so really that's what we're saying is we're saying, hey, I want to reset my title to this value right here of Shrek. And so we could do it this way as well. If I wanted to break it out, I could do handle title. I could say const handle year. That takes in the event, sets the year. And I could do const handle genre and do this as well. Because these are all three separate, I can handle them separately. And then whenever I go in there, I just take this. I add in an on change. So handle, which one is that year? And then, oops. And then handle genre. And now, as I'm doing this, if I were to go to my components, anytime this has changed, you can see that my state is now updated. Now my genre is updated to comedy, my year is updated to 2001, and my title is updated to Shrek. So this is me manipulating my state, right? When it's changed, I am able to track that change and update my state here. Again, we could do this inline in that other way to where if I didn't want to do it, I'll just do one and the other, and then I'll show you a third way to do it. That I could have something like this. I still need my event because I have to reference that event, right, in order to get that value. And then I could just say set title to, in this case, I called it E. So E dot target. Dot value. Cool. This is gonna do the exact same thing. So I could do it up here. If I wanted. Kind of take it out to where it looks a little bit cleaner. Or if you had it quickly, you could just do it inline here. Okay. Stopping there for a second. Any questions, anything, or your minds? You doing okay?
What what is the industry standard then? Like if we're out there, would we see it more like up, like you have it broken up and have it up top, or do we see it more in line where it's in the input?
Yeah, I would say that this way is really popular, especially if it's like a little one-liner like this. You don't want to like
Yeah.
bloat your code and have more lines. I'm going to show you a third way that I would say is probably the most popular. And you'll see why here in just a second. Yeah. Great question though. Any other questions on this? How you guys feeling? Oh, well, lines 1 through 28. Yep, there you go. And again, this is if we want to break out our state into individual pieces of state.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask that. Is this something we can simplify into
Yep.
one consistent?
Yep, that's what we're gonna do here in just a second.
Cool.
Is there a reason to do that? Simplify it? Because I know some people like to have their state separated from everything instead of having it in one big piece of state. And I just wanted to know your
Yeah, I would say that it's probably, I mean, there's some user preference. It might make sense if you like, if things aren't associated to an extent, but if you have like a user and you need like their name, their email, then, if you're having like a user form, you're not really going to kind of separate that and you can still target that. So it kind of is user preference. I have normally seen it done where it's like concatenated almost to where it's all just one. Versus like, especially if you've got a super long form that has like, your address, your city, your all of that, instead of having 9 individual pieces of state, you can just have one piece of state that you can update and manipulate. So I would say it's up to your use case as well. And one thing to know and to think through, right, is your company, when you get there, will oftentimes have, unless you do like a startup, oftentimes have like a company standard sheet, right? And like, this is how we're going to do things. This is how we code. So that way everybody's consistent. So that way it's not like one developer likes to do it one way and another developer does it another way. Oftentimes, especially if you go to a large company, there are sort of standards of this is how we code. We use components versus functions. When we're dealing with state, this is how we introduce it. So they'll actually have that information for you. So that's why I try to show you both, because you could see both, right? You could have a company that's like, nope, we break out our state, or a senior dev that's like, nope, I break out my state. That's what I want you to do. Or you could have another one that's like, no, this is way easier to read. Readability versus, I guess, the functionality of that, if that makes sense. They're both super functional, but it's just, in my opinion, one's way easier to read versus the other is like a little bit more lines. But again, to each his own and what you're trying to accomplish there. Great questions though. Okay. Great. So that's options 1 and 2, right? Where we can either take it this way, and just do it in line, or we could break it out if we wanted to, but this is all with the option. So I'm going to call this option. I'm going to call this option 1 for using state. See, that's why Copilot is dope. I didn't even have to type that. It automatically knew that I was going to say option 1 using state. Sometimes I genuinely think it's listening, which I wouldn't put it past Microsoft, but still, that was dope. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Now our second option of what we can do, and I'm just going to come down here just as a reminder, and I think I said this, anytime we're handling state or functions, we put it above our return statement. I think it kind of goes without saying, but wanted you to just know, anytime we're declaring any sort of function, we're declaring any sort of state, any sort of other hooks, you do that above your return, between your const form and above your return, right? If you did it in your return, unless we're doing like map, you're not going to have a good time, dude. So, okay. So here's our option 2 for using one state, or for using state. Using separate. state. Well, I showed you this yesterday. Instead of breaking this out, what I could do is something like this. Where I've got, I don't know what this is. I've got const movie, right? And this is talking like if I have a user, right? I'm going to say const user, not like instead of having name and age and all this, I'm just going to say what encompasses all of this. So in this case, we're dealing with movies, right? So I'm going to say const movie. And then I'm going to have my title, year, and genre all in one object. Now here, I started this state and said, okay, this is a string, this is a number, this is a string. What I'm saying here is, hey, this state is an object, right? It's got these curly brackets. This is an object. Then when I'm declaring that, I can say, hey, title, I'm not even going to start it at unicorn. It's going to have a title. It's going to have a year. Oops. And it's going to have a genre. I think maybe year does need to. We'll try that as 0. And it's going to have a genre. So instead of having these 3 different pieces of state, I can do it this way. Now with this, it allows us to do something that might seem a little complicated at first, but I think it actually shortens up your code quite a bit. When we are dealing with these individual inputs, right? When we're dealing with these individual inputs, I have to have separate handlers for each one because each one needs to call set year, set genre, set title. I mean, I could do that in line and that's fine, but I have to do it 3 different times. If I'm looking at this, it's like, I'm really doing the same thing. I'm just calling a different setter each time. And so with that, we can, if we put this as one object, we can say, hey, what if we just created, or because we're just using set movie and we're updating this information, I can do that all in one handler, right? In one, not even called a handler, but we'll call it like an on chain or a change handler is usually what it's called, but it's just, I can do it in a more efficient, more usable way or reusable way. So I'm going to say const change handler. Now I'm still, this is handling my change, right? So I'm still going to take in my event. I'm just going to call it E, right? And then I'm still going to have my arrow function, still got to be anonymous. I have my curly brackets, but now stay with me here. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to put this all in one line so that way we have access to what the heck is going on here. Okay. We're saying, hey, when there is a change, I have this event. I'm going to call E. Very similar to this, right? Doing the same exact thing here. But now instead we're calling set movie, which includes all 3 of these, instead of being able to target them individually. Now, because we're doing it this way, we have to use our spread operator. Now, if you remember, if we've got an object that's got a title, a year, and a genre, and I just put, if I'm destructuring it and I just put ... movie, I'm going in here, this object, I'm saying, give me everything, like give me everything that's currently there. And so what this is doing is this is saying, give me all of my data. Then what it's doing is that I've got this comma. And then it's going to say, okay, now where my e.target.name. Now remember, I said that the input name is really important. These must match here and here. My state name matches my input name. What that's going to do is it's going to say, great. And if I were to look at my event, like if I type like, oh, I don't think I'm handling this. Let's go to year. Here, I'll just, great. Yep, show you. I want to do this so that way you can see like a new one. Okay, so here I've got this event, right? And we've already looked at this. This is where we got that dot value. Well, there's another tool I can use within this, within my target, right? My target, I get my dot value, but there's also another key here called name. Called name. And this is the name of the input. So in this case, it was title, right? And so what I'm saying is, hey, give me the name of the input and set in my movie, go to whichever key matches the input that caused this event. And then I want you to give it a value of this value here. And so if on my title, like if I were to console.log e.target.name and e.target.value, I swear this is listening. If I come and refresh, I'm not using change handler yet. I'm going to do that right here. Same way, I just call change handler, just like I did down there. Refresh this. Cool. So now when I type, you see, I typed S, and what it's printing is the target name. So which input told me that, and the value that I was given. In this case is my S. And so what this is saying is, great, I want you to give me everything for my object, because I might, this might come from title and then year and then genre. So I don't want to just rewrite everything. So give me everything. And then if you guys remember from an object, if I just go to some sort of object, right? So I have like person, say let person equals this. And I say name is John. And then I say age is 25. And then I say, person dot, person dot age equals 30. Remember that I can just say, hey, person dot age 30, it's going to go find that key and change its value to whatever I say. I could also say something like person of age 30. And it's going to go again, find that, does the same thing, finds the key of person of age and 30. And if an object doesn't have that, if I accidentally fat fingered it and I said, something like this, it's going to an object. If it's going to look and say, do I have that key? And if so, I'll update its value. If I don't have that key, I'll just create a new value. But I'll just create a new one. I'll create a new key with this value. Sorry. And so that's why it's really important that these match, because if the title or if the name of the input does not match your state, it's just going to create a new key. And we'll see that here in just a second. Cool.
Can you prevent that from happening and have some kind of error come up or anything like that? I'm just wondering.
No, not really, because it doesn't know
Okay.
and just the way an object is stated. I guess you could say if e.target.name is not in movie,
Okay.
create an error. So like you could sort of have an error there.
All right.
But what this is going to do, if I say change handler, and change handler. So now what this is doing is for all of them, if I do this, I'm going to go to let's refresh. I'm going to go to my components. We see that within my form, I've got this sort of state here. Why is that? Oh, I still have my other state. Oops. Get rid of this. Okay. Got an error, set year, set genre. Oh, these guys. Okay. So we see that if I look at my state in my form, I've got this object right here of genre, title, year, right? I don't know why they're in like different orders. I don't know. It drives me insane. I don't understand why this tool does it that way. But anyways, but now if I say Shrek, it allows me just to update my title, release year 2001, and it's a comedy. You see that I can update. And now by doing the same change handler, so I just have one thing that allows me to change whichever input is targeting or whichever input's causing the event. Now I just can reuse that same code everywhere. But one thing I want to show is if I have this and I refresh, cool. It's going to start with title, but the minute I say Shrek, you see now I get a new piece of state. Because as you remember, an object, if it does not have that key, it will create a new one and then assign that value. So that's why it's really important that this name matches your actual state. And so this is the second way you can do it. This is the way that I do it. So I know a lot of people do it. It's a little bit, you can see instead of having all of this different code or having a bunch of inline different stuff, you create one change handler. You create one piece of state, and then it allows you to manipulate that. Okay. I'm done with what I wanted to get over. How we feeling? What are some questions? What's going on?
I really like the way you're doing it. It's just gonna have to remember all the moving parts that, yeah,
Sure.
that's gonna
And
be the harder part, but it's all just repetition, I think, so.
absolutely. Absolutely. So Stacey's got a great point. If the platform doesn't show the name here, and the name is only important if you're going to do it this way. Because we've got to do this e.target.name. Now I believe that you can also log console log e.target, I think. So if I do this and I come here and I refresh, and I say Shrek, I go to this. There's also so here, right? We have all this information. This is my target. So I've got .type, .id. So I could say .id and then associate that way too. So if I said like .id, because I have access to my target.id. Let me just go actually to E. I could use that instead of name, right? But it's just because I'm doing this, I have to associate my input with my state. If I refresh, say S. Here I go e.target.id. I think ID is in here. Yep, ID, which is title. Right. So that's why I'm saying you could do name or title. It doesn't matter, whichever one you choose. But again, that's only important if we're doing it to where everything is combined. If you're not doing it, if you're breaking out state like this, you don't have to have the name or the ID because you're not using that, right? Okay. So I'm looking at, sorry, I'm trying to read in chat. Yeah, and let me just say, whichever one you're more comfortable with, do that, right? Whichever one makes the most sense to you. You don't have to do the things that I do. I've read, or I heard a really cool thing today. One of the instructors kind of had a point where a student was, it's a whole thing kind of not in this class, but in another class, kind of like, man, this is really hard. And I'm having a really challenging time. And he said, if you go hiking, sometimes you just trip on a hill. It doesn't mean you're bad at walking. And because your friend walked in front of you and they didn't trip, doesn't mean that they're a better walker. That just means that maybe on the hill, they might trip another time, right? And if you trip or if you don't trip and they do, that doesn't mean you're better than them. It's just because sometimes you trip and you like, that's just happens. And so I say that with code, if something just isn't clicking, that doesn't mean you're not a good developer, or you're a bad developer. Sometimes it just doesn't click, and something for you might click that doesn't click for somebody else. But for this might click for them and it doesn't for you. So I don't know. I think this is, we'll get plenty of practice. We're going to keep doing this. I'll keep building stuff from scratch. So it's not like I'm just going to build off of this. I'll build it from scratch. That way we can continue to walk through and get practice with this. So if this is a little bit challenging and you're like, oh my gosh, I do not understand this, but you do understand this, then do that. That's okay. And then maybe after you sort of get a grasp of, okay, I'm really understanding. Now I'm going to go try to tackle this. That is a-okay. Somebody said, I want to confirm e.target.name refers to the name of the input tag. Yep. This guy right here. e.target.name is going to refer to this. So if this is different than this, if you have an extra, if you spelled it Y-E-E-R, it's going to create a new key, but it's not going to update this actual piece of state here. Cool.
And then when we are calling this state,
Mhm.
do we need to, for the second option, do we have to start out with like, if we did it separately, I would just call title as the variable I have set for that. For this, do I need to do movie.title or something?
Yep. You just do movie.title. And then like I'm doing that here. Gotta close my div. Yep. So you just do this. And then what is broken? Oh. Do I have an extra div? No. Whoa, what did I do wrong here? Div, close, div, close. I think I'm missing a div. Div.
Looks like there's a curly bracket.
Yeah, I'm missing a div. There we go. Cool. Oh, I don't want this as a row. I just want this as a div. Sorry. So I'm just trying to set this offset 1. Should be 5, 4. That should work just fine. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So now if I said Shrek 201 comedy, I can do that. So all you have to do now is, because this is an object, I just say movie dot and then whatever key I want to target. So I just do a curly bracket, movie.title, movie.year, movie.genre, and it will update and show me that. So if I change this just to see, it'll update each way. Every time it changes, it'll update that. Great question.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you put that HTML in front of 4, because it was JSX, is there anything else that you have to put HTML in front of? Is that like a common thing?
No,
Or
it's
is it
just for your label, but that's if you're handling this. Like, again, if I didn't have this, my labels are going to act a-okay.
Oh, okay.
Nothing's going to break. Yep.
You just add some more functionality.
Yeah, if you wanted to do some sort of functionality, then you can. But yeah, you don't even have to have that. That's just kind of Bootstrap gives me that. But if you just did like this, or maybe it's Copilot, not sure. Yeah, this works the exact same. Yeah.
I have one question. What is that Copilot name?
It's called GitHub Copilot. I would encourage you guys to not use it. Because it doesn't always work. And if you don't know what you're doing, I would encourage that you don't do it yet. Because there's even been things that I've done that it has suggested I do, and even in these classes, right? Where I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I think I kind of explained it the first class. I'd encourage you guys, use ChatGPT to understand stuff, ask how to do stuff. I encourage you to not use Copilot. You guys are adults. If you wanted to use Copilot, you absolutely can. You guys are adults. So do as you want. I just want to make sure that, Copilot, it does sometimes break or do things incorrectly. And so if you don't know what's going on with the code, it's great for like, I know how to build this, right? And so it's really easy for me to just do this. And I like it because I can spend more time going through and explaining than me fat fingering. As you guys have seen, I am terrible at typing. And so instead of us having like user error, I can just go through the code and say, yep, this is what I want to do, and then move forward. But it's called GitHub Copilot. So it's made by the same people of ChatGPT, OpenAI.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It does cost money though.
Do you mind saying how much it costs? Sorry.
Yeah. No. You're totally fine. It's $10 a month. So it's not crazy.
Oh,
Yeah.
but then
I mean-
like if your company uses it, they'd probably pay for it.
The reason I say, and like, I don't shy away from it because at the end of the day, you guys are here to learn. And if you choose not to learn or use tools, then okay, like it's your learning, right? Not mine. I want to help you guys in any way, but if somebody takes a shortcut, not saying that you guys would, but if somebody took a shortcut and didn't understand, but just tried to pass, right? You could just be inhibiting your own learning. On the flip side of this is a tool that since it's come out, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, Copilot came out and said, since its release, 54% of all code written on GitHub was written by Copilot, because every developer uses this. Like, just honestly, every developer uses this in the actual industry because it's little things, right? Like I can just build a form in 5 seconds and I don't need to do anything. It's like kind of this monotonous stuff. It increases. I mean, I don't know how they do this, but increases productivity by Microsoft claims, because Microsoft owns GitHub. Microsoft owns everything, just so you guys know. Now in the coding space, GitHub, OpenAI, ChatGPT, which is OpenAI, Visual Studio Code is Microsoft. They own it all. But with that being said, like they said that productivity's increased 74%, and I sort of get it. Like I can build a lot of stuff really fast. But if you don't know what you're doing, Copilot's not perfect. And so that would be my only warning is it's not perfect. So if you don't know what you're doing, it can get you, and it's done to me. It's gotten to me where like, I'm like trying to build something for class and then I just kind of trusted it. This happened to me last stack and I trusted it and I built like an entire full stack program. I went to run it and I just had over an hour of errors that I was just over and over. And I was like, son of a gun, I trusted you. But it's a really cool tool. And again, I don't shy away because my encouragement is if you guys don't like tech, well, I mean, development's a unique position for you, but this is all my hypothetical thought is it is true that developing is going to look different in the future with ChatGPT, with Bard, if it ever figures it out, especially with Copilot, right? And Copilot X that's coming out and it's going to be insane. What I genuinely think will happen is two things, right? A lot of developers always ask, are we going to get taken over? It's like, no, because clients don't know what the heck they want. And things always change, right? So like you're always going to need a dev, but there is truth that from a junior dev perspective, Copilot can do a lot of stuff, right? And so maybe what I can see is team shrinking just a little bit. That being said, that's all with the assumption that companies are okay with the production that they're currently getting. And insinuating that companies aren't, I'm not saying, I'm not like anti-company, I'm very pro-company, but like the companies aren't going to want more if more is available. It's like, cool, if I have 5 devs and I can do 10 things, but if I had 2 more devs, or like if I already have 5 devs, but now because of Copilot, they can do the work of 7 devs. If I add 2 more, do I get 10 devs, right? And like, how much quicker could we get things out and in production? That's how I think companies are greedy. Like they're going to want more and more and more. And so my thought process, especially in teaching you guys, is what will be the differentiator is, can you utilize these tools to be more efficient, to problem solve faster, to be able to utilize this stuff? Like, I do think it's true that if you don't know, like if you're going head to head with somebody, just from a development, not from like a interview, because you guys are all amazing, but like production, if somebody knows how to do and knows ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, and you just want to write on your own code, not that you guys aren't incredible, but they will dominate because a lot of the stuff that you're still writing, they've like already created forms and pages. And so I really think it's going to be what changes is kind of like the Industrial Revolution. It's right. Like if you learned how to work on the machines, then you got to stay in the companies. And if you didn't, you got replaced. That's where I think it's going to go, is the developers that know how to use these tools to increase production and to stay relevant and to stay productive, or, you know, whatever, that they're going to take over the jobs from the people who are like, no, I'm going to only write in assembly and I just have ones and zeros on my blah, blah, blah. Then yeah, but that's all hypothetical. I could know nothing. So here we are. Okay, that's my rant. Tech is everywhere. The overlord of ChatGPT is yeah, I give in. I'm like, heck yeah. Wait, what is the, I'm gonna go ahead and, are there any questions? And then I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.